Hey guys, it's Melanie. Welcome to my channel. Today we're doing part 2 of the Once Upon a Book Club Advent Calendar. So stay tuned. So if you're just tuning into this and you haven't seen part 1, I suggest going and watching that, because our story for the Advent calendar is one continuous story. So if you want to hear the first 4 days of that story, go watch part 1. But I can show you the gifts. We've got 2 books. We have Love and Other Constellation Prizes by Jamie Ford and A Piece of the World by Christina Baker Klein. And then we have these super cute Bookish mittens. Love them. They're super cozy. And a super cute bookworm keychain, which I love. So now we're going to go on to day 5. A hollowed voice echoed through the darkness of Amelia's head, repeating a quote pulled right from the novel she had just been so caught up in reading before she'd fallen into this uneasy sleep. My theory is that the best, worst, happiest, saddest, scariest, and most memorable moments are all connected. Those are the important times, good and bad. The rest is just filler. Amelia tossed and turned in her sleep, anxious as the words repeated over and over, until an image of a car began to appear simultaneously over the chanting. Black, sleek, familiar. Table 4. She hadn't learned his name, but he sat in the driver's seat of his fancy-looking car, his gray eyes glancing at her through the car windows. Him driving off into the darkness as the words, "Those are the important times," continued to get louder and louder as his car got further and further away until they were almost at an unbearable decimal, and then sunlight. Amelia's eyes were heavy as she opened them to a few rays of sunshine peeking through the bedroom blinds. Bennett must have been tugging at them, as the light sometimes caught his attention. Either that, or this was his way of complaining about her not getting up to feed him at a reasonable hour. She sat up and stretched, pushing loose strands of hair from her face as her knee bumped into the novel she'd fallen asleep reading. It lay on the bed next to her favorite book light, still on and pointing toward the wall. She reached over to switch it off and placed it gently on her nightstand before she grabbed her phone off the charger. 10:10 a.m. flashed as she turned it back on. Crap! She swung her legs onto the floor, grateful her socks had stayed on throughout the night, as she knew just how cold her wood floors could be, and headed into the bathroom to get ready for the day. Between a shower, drying her hair, getting dressed, and clasping on her favorite necklace, she accepted that her plans would have to start later than expected. It wasn't until almost noon that she finally fed Bennett, or Big Ben as she affectionately dubbed him, and his appetite. Grabbed her car keys off the counter where she'd thrown them the night before, and made her way outside. It was her day off and she needed to run errands. Otherwise, the only places she'd have gone all week would have been work and home. She climbed into the car again, hoped and crossed all her fingers that it would catch. Amazingly, it did. Luckily, the auto parts store was stop number 1. If getting a new battery was all she needed to avoid having to close her eyes and hope for a miracle every day that her car would work, she'd just buy one. Pulling into the lot at the auto parts store, the bell above her chimed gently as she opened the door. Mr. Anderson, one of the many members of Clarksbridge, who had inherited his shop from his father before him, greeted her. "Amelia, what do I owe the pleasure?" Mr. Anderson was around her dad's age, and he knew her car was likely to fall apart on her any day now from how frequently she stopped by. So he tried to help her out whenever she stopped in. "Hi, Mr. Anderson. Need a new battery. Had to have it jumped just to get here." She figured saying that it was jumped last night was unnecessary information that would result in a barrage of questions of who, what, when, where, and why. "No problem, Amelia. Get your hood open and I'll meet you out front and we can get it all hooked up for you." He headed toward the back of the store to grab the necessary components while she headed back out to the Oldsmobile. Mr. Anderson appeared and set straight to work. Yet another reason Amelia liked coming here. He was comfortable with silence. It only took him a few minutes, after which she followed him back inside to settle up. She turned back toward the parking lot when she nearly collided with someone walking inside the shop door. Oh, sorry. She stopped short, looking up into the gray eyes of none other than Table 4. Okay, so the gift for day 5 is right here. It's a little LED mini lamp. It says, it clips on your book, it sits on your desk. Cute. That is so cute. So it looks like it can clip on your book like this. Yeah. Or you use the base. Just set it on your desk. How stinking cute is this? This just reminds me of like one of those little Pixar shorts. That's so cute. It's pretty bright too. Okay, on to day 6. Table 4 looked down at her almost expectantly, as if waiting for her to finish her apology. Amelia was so taken aback by the whole thing, however, that her voice caught in her throat. When it was clear she wasn't going to say anything, he took the lead. "Funny running into you here," he said, with an underlying tone of a joke. He sidestepped her and headed toward the counter to ask where he could find some sort of fluid. "Are you following me?" Amelia huffed, running after him between the aisles as he glanced down each one before moving on. "Why would I do that?" The annoyance in his voice thick as he finally located a jug of ice blue liquid and turned back toward the front of the store. "More so. If I was following you, do you think I'd blatantly run into you? Don't you think I'd be a bit more careful to not be noticed?" She had to admit he had a point. The whole thing seemed more coincidental than anything. Table 4 turned back to face her at the counter as Mr. Anderson entered the sale into the ancient register. His eyes paused on her pink necklace. "What book is that supposed to be?" She instinctively wrapped her fingers around it. "Oh, just something from my book club." She felt it, the clasp open, and his eyes scanned the inside. "And they all read happily ever after." Fitting. She could feel her annoyance bubbling up, assuming he meant it rudely, and began to make an exit out the door. "What's your favorite?" he called over after her. She paused and glanced over her shoulder toward him, his eyes still on her. "Your favorite book?" He shrugged with that annoying half-smile. "Honestly, Fahrenheit 451. He looked surprised. "Really? For such a big bookworm, I'd have thought you want that book as far from you as possible." His response clearly indicating he knew the general plot. She shrugged. "I like the fact that it shows what a society without knowledge could become. And it reminds me not to take it for granted." She rattled this off with practiced ease, used to people questioning her choice. He pondered this, grabbed the bottle off the counter, and began to walk toward the exit where she stood, one hand on the door. Upon reaching her, he kept his eyes downward and placed a finger on his own lip, as though deciding whether or not to say something. He looked up at her and lowered his hand to push the door open for her. "Could you show me the nearest bookshop?" She pulled into a space in front of Hartnell's, one of the 2 bookstores in town. While both were family-run, Hartnell's had a bigger selection. The other bookshop, More Than Words, was big on romance and was run by some of the nosiest old ladies Clarksbridge had to offer. For this trip, Hartnell's was a much safer bet. Entering the store, the scent of aged paper and coffee filled her and made her feel whole. Table 4 entered behind her, taking in the towering stacks of new copies from popular authors, to the ancient and cracking spines of the rare editions locked behind glass near the counter. The shop was filled with natural wood and was just as warm and inviting as Maria Elaine's. Amelia headed for the coffee spot toward the back of the store. Tucked into the corner was a little table with an old coffee maker and a stack of paper cups towering next to it, along with a bundle of coffee stirrers, napkins, and a creamer waiting patiently next to it. Uniquely, and she'd never tell Maria this, Hartnell's had the absolute best cup of coffee, despite the fact that you had to make it yourself in a seemingly typical pot. Amelia swore it was magic. Making herself a cup, she took a seat in one of the armchairs placed in the corner by the window overlooking the woods surrounding the store. Table 4 sat across from her, a steaming cup in hand. She stirred her coffee slowly. "So, you're a reader?" "I am, "And so are you." He smiled warmly. The first time she saw an actual emotion within it other than smugness, and she unintentionally smiled back. Not a big, ridiculous one with teeth, but a smile of recognition, closed lip and shy, but a smile all the same. They sat for a few minutes before they both started speaking simultaneously, cutting each other off. Then came the real, tooth-filled and mildly embarrassed smiles as comfort began to fill the air surrounding them. "You go," she said as the chuckling resided, motioning for him to continue with whatever it was he was starting to say. He held his smile and leaned back in his chair, clutching his cup of coffee. "Eli. My name is Eli." Okay, now to open the gift for day 6. I love it! Oh, this is so perfect. So it's her necklace. Let me show you. And what's so funny about it is it's the Once Upon a Book Club box. Hilarious. And it says Once Upon a Book Club. So funny. And let's see. It does open up and it says, "They all read happily ever after." I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not. Yeah, there you go. So stinking cute. Love that. On to day 7. Amelia and Eli talked in Hartnell's bookstore for over 2 hours. They hadn't realized the time until Mr. Hartnell walked by and asked if they wanted refills on the coffee before he cleaned the machine. They stood and meandered through the stacks for a bit, pointing out authors they read or wanted to read, books they enjoyed or couldn't stand. They reached a novel on an end cap and argued over who was right, Amelia for hating it so much, or Eli for loving it. They continued their conversation until they split up to divide and conquer the store. Amelia taking over the classics section and Eli heading who knew where to look for the who knew what. Amelia perused the editions of Anne of Green Gables, Pride and Prejudice, and The Catcher in the Rye, before finally pausing on a stunning copy of Persuasion. While she much preferred Sense and Sensibility, she had a soft spot for Anne Elliot and carried it to the front of the store. Eli stood by the counter, bag in hand. He waited for her to check out while Mr. Hartnell made small talk with Amelia regarding the copy of Persuasion she grabbed, telling her small facts about the design and printing process of this particular copy. He turned with the book in hand toward the back counter to wrap it in his signature mint and gold tissue paper before gently placing it in the paper shopping bag printed with simple black text that read Hartnell's. Eli held the door open as they exited the bookstore. They walked toward their cars, shopping bags gently bumping into each other, until they reached Amelia's driver's side. "Well, this was fun," he said, without a hint of sarcasm. "It's rare to find a fellow bibliophile. I'm glad to know one." "Me too." She stood with her keys in her hands. "Well, I'll see you around." She unlocked the car and placed the bag containing Persuasion in the back seat. When she turned around, he was just starting to walk around to his driver's side. She swallowed nervously. "Maybe tomorrow night?" He looked up immediately. "Dinner?" She shrugged and smiled, another of those timid smiles, waiting. This was so unlike her, but she felt brave as she channeled Anne Elliot. And there it was, the toothy and relaxed smile she was hoping for. Absolutely. Amelia arrived home shortly thereafter, as soon as she had flown there. Collapsing on the couch, she stared at the ceiling for a moment, having a difficult time wrapping her head around the turn of her day took. "I didn't do most of my errands," she said out loud to no one. In response, a heavy Bennett jumped onto her stomach and laid down purring, as if telling her it was no big deal, as long as his food container was full. She scratched under Bennett's chin for a moment while she ran through the details of her plans for tomorrow evening, until she sat straight up, essentially tossing the cat onto the floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry, baby." She chased after him into the kitchen and placed a few treats in his bowl as a meager attempt at apology. When she stood up, her eye was immediately drawn to the bag on the counter from Hartnell's that she had thrown there when she had first arrived home. She pulled out the mint green and gold package and tore it open, excited to return to a story she hadn't enjoyed in a while. Yet, inside the classic green and gold packaging was not Persuasion. A copy of Secret Sisters by Joy Calloway stared up at her. This was so not what she had purchased. She almost didn't notice the note sticking out of the book as her confusion overwhelmed her. Cracking it open to page 50, stuck near the bottom was a note. This sentence reminded me of you. I told Mr. Hartnell to hold your copy of Persuasion for you, but I wanted you to have this, so I had him wrap it up instead. Strong, book-loving women. Seems perfect for you. Thanks for today. Eli. Amelia removed the note from the book and looked underneath it, finding the sentence, "If we're not going to do that today, would it be all right if I excused myself to the library?" She laughed, but felt the onset of butterflies appear in her stomach. After only a few hours together, someone in a book reminded him of her, and that thought made her giddy. After getting into her cozy reading clothes and making a simple dinner, she curled up on the couch with this unexpected gift and began reading the story of how these smart and inspirational women fought for what they believed in. Okay, so now day 7. And it is the book Secret Sisters by Joy Calloway. And there is a piece of paper here on page 50, just like it said, with the same note over the same line. Cute. So this says, Illinois, 1881. Whitcott College sophomore Beth Carrington has 2 goals to fulfill by the time she graduates. Obtain a medical degree and establish a women's fraternity, Beta Xi Beta. That will help young women like herself to connect with and support one another while attending the male-dominated WITSIT. Neither is an easy task. The sole female student in the physician's program, Beth is constantly called out by her professors and peers for having the audacity not to concentrate on a more fitting subject like secretarial studies. Meanwhile, secret organizations are off limits, and simply by crowding together in a dank basement room and creating a sense of camaraderie, she and her small group of fraternity sisters risk expulsion. In order to have the fraternity recognized, she turns to the most powerful student on campus, Senior Grant Richardson, Iota Gamma fraternity president, and the scion at WITSIT family, a man she's only acquainted with because of her long-standing friendship with his fraternity brother, Will Buchanan. Staunchly traditional, Grant doesn't see the purpose of this women's organization, but captivated by Beth, he agrees to give her a helping hand. What she doesn't know is how many will stop at nothing to keep her burgeoning organization out of the record books, and whom she can actually trust along the way. As Beth fights for her beloved Beta Xi Beta to be recognized, she will uncover deep secrets about the college and those who surround her, and will have to put both love and friendship on the line so that history can be made. Okay. Now on to day 8. Amelia parked outside Maria Elaine's early the next morning in a much better headspace than she was the day before. Calm and more centered, she had plowed through the entire book last night and had fallen in love with a story she absolutely would never have picked up for herself. Maria opened the back door to the kitchen for her almost immediately after Amelia rang the bell, startling her. "Who is it?" she shrieked excitedly, essentially jumping up and down like a schoolgirl, clapping her hands together before gripping Amelia's upper arms. "What are you talking about?" Maria wriggled herself free of the woman's grip and headed toward the coat rack to hang up her things. "Evelyn Mullaney saw you leaving Anderson's yesterday with a man, and Nick Duffrey saw you in Hartnell's having coffee with someone too." She clapped her hands together and smiled widely. "Who is it?" Neither of them recognized him. Amelia stayed facing the coat rack a moment as she tried to even out her breathing. It's a small town. This is what happens when everyone knows everyone. She composed herself before turning back around. "His name is Eli. He was the man at table 4 the other day." She hoped on everything that Maria didn't remember him. "Wasn't that the customer who had you all stressed out?" Maria's initial excitement turned to skepticism, as she knew how difficult it was for a customer to rattle Amelia. Amelia sighed. This was going to be a long day. She went about her morning tasks for preparing the various machines and prepping the ingredients needed in the kitchen, filling the pastry case and taking chairs off the tables, all while retelling the story of yesterday to Maria. By the time they unlocked the front door, Maria was all smiles once again. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I know how tough it is to find a fellow book lover. She looked over at Elaine and smiled. When you find one, you don't let go. She sashayed into the kitchen, humming to herself in much better spirits. Yet when Amelia turned toward Elaine, Elaine's arms remained crossed and defensive. Okay, out with it, Amelia said to her from behind the counter. Elaine kept her eyes downward as she picked up a spoon rest and carefully stamped it with one of the most popular designs, the first chapter of Wuthering Heights, Elaine's favorite. Elaine finally looked up at the end of the line of text, which she had memorized by heart, and stared at Amelia before shrugging and looking back down. Amelia walked around the counter and sat on the bench with the walls of the gift area. She waited until Elaine paused with the stamp before reaching out and squeezing her knee. What is it? Elaine looked back up at her and sighed. You know how I am with new people, especially new people that don't give good first impressions. Amelia knew there was a reason Elaine kept herself busy with trinkets and projects rather than regularly interact with customers. That was much more Maria's dream. His coldness to you spoke volumes. She nodded toward the spoon rest. Damaged people, damaged people. That's essentially how all the characters interact in Wuthering Heights. You need to be cautious with who you give your heart to. She stamped the number 1 at the bottom of the dish to represent the page number and set it aside to dry before finally lifting her eyes to Amelia's. Just be careful, mi amor. She reached out and grabbed Amelia's hand with both of hers. Maria and I are always here if you need us. The corners of her lips turned up before she let go and set to work on another piece. Amelia sat there a moment, just staring at the spoon rest that sat on the shelf, slowly drying as the seconds ticked by. Elaine had a tough exterior, but when someone did break through, she loved fiercely. Amelia took any advice she offered to heart, as she did not provide it often. Amelia stood and walked back to the dining room, still caught in the web of her own thoughts, as the front bell jingled, signifying the start to a busy day, leaving her little time to consider it all. Okay, now on to the day 8 one. Oh, goodness. So my battery is about to die. I'll come back to the day 8 in just a second. Okay, sorry if there was an angle change. Now on to the day 8 gift. It's kind of heavy. Oh, it's the spoon rest they were talking about. That's neat. Very cool. So it's got page 1 of Wuthering Heights on it. Okay, so that's the last gift that we're going to do in this video, I do believe. Yes. So we will do days 9 through 12 in part 3. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. And until next time, remember to always be completely you. Bye!